It's on the second screen.
It's on the other monitor.
Oh, man.
Exactly. So, hello everyone, and welcome back to episode 54 of Rocket Lab Weekly. And this week we have Dave G Investing with us and Matt Money with us. What's up, you guys? How was your week?
Not bad. I guess just a little story, not Rocket Lab related. I'm sure we'll get into a lot of that stuff later on, but I've been selling some covered calls on Tesla because I wanted to reduce my position on it, and I was debating whether I wanted to do it before or after their big event because I had some expire like right beforehand. And I was like, oh, wait, I'll see if it moves up. And obviously it crashed. So I was like, damn it, I should have sold them before the event. And I should have known because they always crash after these things, but it's all good. Oh my God.
Oh, there it is.
Fool's gold. Holy crap.
Oh, holy moly, Jesus Christ.
The man in Italy.
Thank God for the greatest businessman in Elon Musk, helping all of our friends ends in the hurricanes with Starlink and Teslas not needing gas. F all the Elon haters. Yeah, I don't know what to say on this. I know that there's on this Rocket Lab pool or whatever pool party that is called. There's so much calm. I'm like trying to keep up with everything, but it seems to be that there was some beef between some people.
I don't even follow that chat. It's just I've got too many group chats, too many places to keep up to date. You've got Discords, Reddits, like I don't know. Yeah.
But I agree with this statement. Like Elon Musk is obviously a really savvy businessman, and anybody who says that he is not is please show us your receipts. Show us how you have built something better than Mr. Musk. But where were we?
Welcome back to the SpaceX Weekly.
Exactly, SpaceX Weekly. So your Tesla position, that's where we were.
Yeah. So I didn't write the covered calls. I would have got like a good $5,000 in premium that most likely would have ended up expiring. Now I could sell them and get maybe, I don't know, less than a third of that. So I'll have to decide what I want to do. And then obviously I was hoping for a move on the day of the Bloomberg event. And didn't really happen. I made a small little trade around that. I don't know if you guys saw.
I saw your tweet, yeah.
Yeah. Confidence was low because I knew Peter wasn't coming, but I thought, hey, maybe, if it was like these other companies being there kind of threw me and made me think maybe there'll be some kind of partnership announcement, whether it was Northwood or Endurial, seemed possible. So I was like, I'll do a small trade just to see if anything happens here. It didn't. I got out. I probably lost like $250, but yeah, it is what it is.
Isn't it funny that it feels like on the trading, it's like you think like I should make this trade, and then it goes your way, and then you're like, okay, I'm not a trader, and then the next event happens, and you're like, I should do this trade, and then it would have gone your way, and you're like, okay, the next time I will do the trade, and then you do the trade, and then it doesn't happen.
Yeah, of course.
It's like,
I mean. Yeah. I fully admit, like it's almost like a, do as I say, not as I do type thing. I guess I have a little bit of a gambler in me because I enjoy making these little moves, but I always make sure to keep them very small. And I'm always sure that like if I lose the entire principal, I'm still completely fine. My portfolio is okay. I never like throw 50% of my portfolio in some kind of a short-term option trade or something like that.
Dave's got that dog in him. That's what he's trying to say.
No, I just like to have a little fun with it, He's
got that dog in him.
I think all of us have this. It's just that it just depends on how you control it, So
yeah.
I definitely
right before we went live there, I saw a post someone on Wall Street Bets, of course, lost $250,000 out of their $300,000 portfolio. And I was just like, yeah, I will make a trade and risk
it was
maybe 1% of my portfolio. I'm not going to do something like that.
Yeah, and that trade, it wasn't even like it was a pure play on the Tesla event. Yeah. If I understand. And I'm like, Tesla always like runs before the events and then sells off. Like, I mean, even if I don't know what he was thinking, it was
yeah, it was a weird one.
Yeah.
So I guess on the trading front, I haven't had a great week, but just holding good companies has been good. And as I said, I only lost, $250 maybe on the Rocket Lab trade and a bit of opportunity cost and like time on Tesla. But yeah, that's it.
All right. Matt, how was your week?
Good week, man. Matt Money is going to zero as expected. We got Hot Fool's Gold coming in with more love.
Oh my
thank
God.
You. Thank you, sir.
Jesus
Much appreciated.
No.
Teddy is the genius behind Dave G. I agree 100%.
It's true. If you saw one of my recent videos, you might have seen him walking around back there, but it's hard to spot.
And I think that is Fool's Gold 20th super chat. It says a nice big 20 next to his name on my screen.
Wow. What a guy.
Yeah. Much appreciated. But yeah, it's going to zero. Well, I guess 0 plus 99.99. But yeah, much appreciated as always. I've been having a lot of fun listening to or seeing Fool's Gold's behind the scenes trips, which I'm excited to see more of. Maybe I shouldn't say too much because they are private. But anyway, week for me was really good. I continued to try to position myself for what I think is the future. So I've stacked a little bit of cash. I've got some cash come in and paying off some 401k loans that I had to like buy some of the recent properties. I just use it because I'd normally have a little bit of cash to buy some of these properties, but at the same time, I'm like, if I can use a 401k loan, it makes it a little bit easier and I don't have to sell anything in my personal portfolio. So that's generally what I'll do. So I had an influx of cash. So I paid some of that off, and that's nice because it helps with cash flow a little bit monthly. So I did that earlier in the week, and so that'll be $200 every couple weeks. So it's about $400 a month. That's now going to be able to come into my bank account, which previously was going to that. So that's nice. And then just some decent stuff like with Palantir, it's doing really well. And just overall, the portfolio is doing handsomely. Like Amazon's about $190. It's almost like a $75,000 position for me. And just the SPY in general, right? I have a pretty decent SPY position, and that's at all-time high. So continuing to just do phenomenal work with respect to just keeping it super simple and waiting for any sort of potential pullbacks, whether that's in Rocket Lab, whether that's in the S&P, whether that's just in general, because I'm looking to like a hawk to be able to add at lower prices for sure. But I don't normally time things, but it seems a little bit far in the tooth, and the uncertainty that's kind of going on with respect to the elections and interest rates. And I'm starting to see more and more mass layoffs. Like Boeing just announced 17,000 layoffs yesterday or the day before. So I'm just trying to realize how now that we're defocusing on inflation in the United States with respect to the Fed interest rate cuts and more so focusing on the labor market, if some of those numbers continue to persist in the wrong direction, I feel like it'll drive things in a very negative direction potentially. And I just want to make sure that I have some cash on the side if needed.
I think it's good advice.
I think so too. Everything feels very, very, very stretched right now, for me at least.
I think anytime your portfolio is near all-time highs, it's worth taking a step back and thinking about where things are right now.
Yeah. Cool. So let's segue into what has happened with Rocket Lab Weekly. And I mean, Dave, you started to speak about this inadvertently. So the Bloomberg interview, I think we were pretty well managed on the expectations going into the event. None of us was overblown or saying like for sure there is an announcement. But it ended up being like almost a bit less than what we thought. So I'm curious, what was your guys' main takeaway from the events or for the interview? And where do we go from here?
I mean, I'll just be honest. I found it to be a little disappointing. Like, Adam's interview was nice. The interviewer, I don't know, just asked a lot of questions about SpaceX, which I understand because they get asked about SpaceX a lot in the competition. But then the interview even kind of closed it with like, okay, so what's great about SpaceX? And it's like, aren't we here to talk about Rocket Lab at Rocket Lab's HQ? So that was a little annoying, and I don't know. I think I didn't have massive expectations, especially because Peter wasn't going to be there, but I did hope there might be some little surprise announcement or like, oh, by the way, we got a new launch contract or something. But yeah, it was fine. I guess, didn't mind hearing from Adam and Northwood and the rest.
Yeah. Matt?
I would say that it's less than I was expecting. I didn't have high expectations either. I expected to only really see 3 companies, not the 5 or 6 that they brought out. And I was expecting more of a 20-minute segment. So, I mean, I knew that Peter wasn't going to be there based off of tweets that I'd saw. And, all right.
We've kicked out Vince, guys.
Yeah, Vince to 0.
We had enough of that guy. We're taking over the stream.
We're taking over. I
need that sweet super thanks money. So
super thanks money.
But continue. Well, I'm sure he'll rejoin in a second.
Yeah, there he is, the myth, the legend.
I don't understand. I exited my own stream by accident.
I hacked into your computer and kicked you out. But I mean, I just was expecting more of like a 20-minute segment. I think it felt a little rushed. Adam did a phenomenal job speaking eloquently at the fast pace that he did. I would actually like to see a competition between Amit and Adam for speaking at pace with eloquency, because I think that they would have a fun time going back and forth. But I think Adam did a decent job. The interviewee wasn't throwing the best of questions, I would say, out there. And I think that that's okay, because it's the first time they've really had an interaction, right? It's not like it's Becky Quick and Warren Buffett for their 20th interview, right? I think it's the initial interview. They're going to have to get into a groove. But the thing that did bother me the most, and I already kind of stated it, but I want to reiterate, you're hosting it in Long Beach. Like, give the guys 20 minutes. You know what I mean? Like, they were kind enough to host everybody. And I know it wasn't like a very eloquent and great setup. It was just a table in the middle of the floor, but give the guys 20 minutes, like if you're going to be the spotlight and host it at Rocket Lab. And granted, I will say there was a little bit more in terms of praise towards Rocket Lab in general, due to the fact that, you had Varda there, and Varda shouted out Rocket Lab. You even had Andrew shout out Rocket Lab. So you had some people shouting out Rocket Lab in terms of just what they've been able to do for the industry and driving it forward and being in terms of partnerships. But yeah, I was kind of disappointed that they got the equal amount of time as everybody else.
I have a question. Wasn't it weird when Varda Space was like, we designed the spacecraft, and because I thought that it was like Rocket Lab who designed it, and they like cooperated on it with Rocket Lab. But
I mean, I don't think Varda lied, because the re-entry capsule was theirs and it was sitting on a Photon bus, and there's like a lot of cooperation that goes into it. But yeah, it's
I mean, I
it's an
thought that they
interesting line.
I thought that they like designed it together. So I was a bit surprised when he just said like, no, we have our own spacecraft. And I was like, okay.
I mean, I think you can count it as their spacecraft that is like a payload on Rocket Lab's satellite. But definitely Rocket Lab had a lot to do with, lining up the re-entry and everything like that. So
100%. Yeah. I mean, a lot of things, like for the company I work for, you would probably hear our name, the company that I work for, rather than a lot of the contractors that do a lot of the work for us underlyingly. I think it's the same sort of thing. It's like Varda is the one that's paying the paycheck and paying the salary for, or the contract for whatever, so they can kind of own it in that respect, even though they're not the ones that may have done X, Y, or Z. So it's kind of unfortunate, but it makes sense. I feel like that's typical for a lot of engineering sort of things.
And the next one's coming up. Sorry, the next Varda capsule, but I just figured I'd mention. Should be interesting. Yeah.
What was the thing that Varda is flying on SpaceX Falcon 9? Did I catch that correctly?
That is it did fly on Falcon 9 rideshare. Rocket Lab did not actually launch it. Satellite.
Okay. So they only manufactured the bus for it.
They only made the satellite.
And operated it.
And operated it
yeah.
for a very extended period of time because Varda couldn't get their re-entry permits for quite a while.
Interesting. So for me, my only beef with the interview was that they kept asking Rocket Lab about Electron, and I feel like that's like when you're doing your beginner DD on Rocket Lab and you think that they're a rocket company and you think that the whole company is Electron, and that I really didn't like that it went to a point of like, why aren't you launching more Electrons? And then Adam Spice was like, yeah, it's the market, like there is not enough market to do more. We can and I just didn't like how that was said, right? Because it's like it almost made it feel like, okay, this company is a bit like limited by demand, and they focus so much on that I don't know. I didn't like that. I would have loved that they asked more about Neutron and like what's the income possibilities of Neutron, and yeah. So
I will say, Bloomberg, big organization for a lot of investors and a lot of people. That's probably their first time ever hearing about Rocket Lab. So yeah, you do want a good impression, but I guess, to some degree, no publicity is bad publicity. So
exactly.
Maybe it'll be on a few more people's radar now. Yeah,
definitely agree with that. And okay, then the next question is, there was speculation that Anduril and Rocket Lab would have a partnership. Were you guys surprised that in the end it was Impulse Space that partnered with Anduril?
There's a few different things going on. So previously, I think it was like a week or 2 or 3 ago, they did announce a satellite bus provider who was someone else, not Rocket Lab. But then, a lot of people were like, oh, of course, Rocket Lab wouldn't make an announcement during this event. That's not the point. Meanwhile, Anduril does. Am I pronouncing it wrong? Anduril or Anduril? Or
I think it's Anduril.
Okay.
But don't listen to the Swedish guy. Let's ask
I just
Matt.
go with the Lord of the Rings. Anyway, so they did make an announcement kind of during the event via tweet or whatever. So it wasn't shocking. But I did hold out hope that maybe Rocket Lab would supply them some satellite buses or something.
Yeah, me too. It kind of makes sense because I followed Impulse Space a little bit, and that's their business, like to shift orbits, basically, if I understand it correctly.
Very cool company.
Yeah, and I guess like from a military, like okay, it was very interesting that they said that the cost of like going into geostationary orbit, which is the 36,000 kilometer high orbit, is very expensive, but you can go up to LEO quite cheaply, and then you can use Impulse Space to then go from LEO to GEO, and that this would like lower dramatically the cost, and that was a very interesting concept, because normally when you add more vehicles and more points, it normally like increases the costs. And I'm curious like what implications this will have for maybe also Rocket Lab, because I don't know if Neutron is ever planning to go to geostationary orbit.
I'm sure they could.
Because they're always talking about LEO, right?
Yeah, well, the LEO's a bigger market. Geo, is still there. Some other companies are starting to focus on it more and more. What's that one? The satellite was called Arcturus, but there was anyway, doesn't matter right now. I think Impulse's big thing is they're thinking, okay, what's the industry going to look like if Starship is launching constantly and sending things to LEO? And they think, well, we can be in space mobility. It'll be really cheap to get something to LEO, and then we'll take you from there to where you want to go, type thing.
Yeah. Pretty interesting stuff. So I guess that it's perfectly matched what Anduril wanted, and then I was like, yeah, it makes sense that they go with this one, but I kind of wanted Rocket Lab there, but that's our bias there. So the next one, am I not sharing anymore? No, because that also, when I exited the stream to go to the pub with fool's money, the sharing stopped. So let's talk about the Mars sample return mission. So Rocket Lab was awarded a contract by NASA to study retrieving samples from the Martian surface. And what's interesting is my understanding of this cycle is that there was an original like 4 or 5 companies that were bidding, and then somehow like Rocket Lab was taken out of the bidding process, and then in the second round was put back into the bidding process, and then they ended up winning this study award. Dave, you recently did a video about this. Do you want to summarize like what a Mars sample return mission could mean for Rocket Lab and what it entails?
Oh, I mean, it would be massive. Basically, there's a rover on Mars right now called Perseverance, which has been digging up samples of Martian rocks and soil, putting them into these little canisters. The rover does not have any way to actually get these samples back to Earth. And NASA had a plan which went way over budget and was going to take way too long. Big surprise there. So they're now trying to see if private industry can figure out a cheaper, quicker way of doing it, and they ask for bids. These are just studies to, award to companies to, basically research the problem and put together a proposal. So they're all like, $1 million or less, not huge, but it could lead to multi-billion-dollar contract if they are the ones selected. And we're now down to 8, Rocket Lab being one of the 8 who are doing these studies.
Cool. Now, one question that I have, because before the stream, I wanted to study like, okay, what is the price range of, Mars missions? And I know that it's very much not apples to apples when you compare these things. Mm-hmm. And many of the missions are multi-billion-dollar missions. But then I remember that the Escapade, the twin satellites, Peter Beck mentioned it, that it's insane that they managed to do it in the tens of millions of dollars. And I mean, Blue Origin is launching them for $30 million allegedly. So that mission to Mars, I know that they're not landing on Mars and returning samples, but it's like around 100 million, And I'm like, what if Rocket Lab pulls a very efficient one, and then it becomes only a $500 million contract, because we're kind of expecting like that this would be a multi-billion-dollar contract. Mm-hmm. That's observation number 1. And observation number 2 is that these contracts are fixed price contracts. And is there a risk for Rocket Lab that, okay, they are bidding that this whole thing, they're going to do it for 500 million, but because it's such a complicated mission, like, is there a risk that it can cost them 700 million, or, like something goes wrong and then they're not reimbursed by that?
Yeah, I mean, that's always the risk with fixed price contracts, right? Something goes wrong, it goes over budget, and you end up having to spend more. That's why I guess you better be really confident in your team and your technology and in your ability to execute. So I suppose the risk is there, as it is with any time that you take a fixed price contract. I guess it depends on, how confident you are in the team executing. I would say though, like, I don't think Escapade is a good comparison, just because this mission is so much more difficult and so much more complicated. We're talking about, first of all, you have to land on the surface, which is very difficult because Mars has a very thin atmosphere. So you're not going to just do it on parachutes alone. I wouldn't think it'll be like some kind of propulsive landing. Then you have to somehow meet up with this rover on the surface, transfer the samples over to your lander. And then you need to have brought a little rocket with you. You're shooting up into Martian orbit. And then your second orbiter spacecraft catches that sample, which has been shot into Martian orbit at just the right time, and grabs it and then goes off back to Earth. So like they said they can do, they're going to bid like under 2 billion. But yeah, I think it'll be a challenging mission. And sometimes it feels like Rocket Lab just likes to go for the most challenging things possible. So it's interesting, but I guess it would teach them a lot for sure if they did get it. But I think there would probably be subcontractors involved, and it would probably be closer to the, 2 billion mark. Hopefully there's a good profit margin in there.
Yeah. The hope is, even if there's not profit margin, I think, like you said, I think as long as they can develop an avenue where they foresee decent long-term revenue coming through with profit margin, I think you're right. I think so. They might have some R&D associated with it that, they might not necessarily break even on contract number one, but if this is something that they need to do in the long term and continue to do between now and, I guess, 2035, this is something that would potentially be worth investing in, even if you maybe lose a little bit of money up front. So I'm kind of curious. I don't necessarily know all the intricacies and the details. Like you said, it's very different than what's going on with Escapade and what happened with Capstone, right? So I'm kind of curious to see the granularity and hearing about it. Hopefully within the next 4 or 5 weeks when we have the earnings report. I'm sure they're going to give a decent amount of details on it. They might not give contract details, but actually maybe they have to, I guess, if it shows up in the backlog. But kind of curious because it has been officially announced, right? I mean, they've officially said like it's a go.
I mean, they're only getting like $700,000 for the study of it, but I think we'll get an announcement sometime. I don't know. I would think within 6 months, but that's just a guess on my part. So yeah, like a 1 in 8 chance, I suppose they land the whole thing. If they did, it would take their backlog, I guess, from 1 billion to 3 billion. It would massively expand their capabilities. It would be an extremely impressive and prestigious thing to bring the first Martian sample back to Earth, as well as having a Venus mission going to check for life on Venus. Like, yeah, it would be extremely cool, and I'm sure they would learn a lot from it as well, getting paid to learn, as Peter says. So I really hope they get it, but we'll have to see.
And do you guys think that these contracts, because I'm also curious, like, do they get paid if the samples return? Or is it like what Peter said, that on engine ignition, like NASA checks the project and they're like, yeah, it's within our safety parameters, and we start the ignition, and then Rocket Lab delivered even if the sample return? Because I mean, it's so crazy, because if you say that, let's say like you go to Mars, right, and then the landing on the Mars is very tough. Oh my God, fool's gold.
Fool's gold is feeling happy today, Christ. I guess. Yeah.
You see
single-handedly funding the Rocket Lab Weekly.
Matt, you checked out into the pub with fool's gold money there.
Yeah, I think so. I think I have to take a hiatus, and apparently I need to go to Europe and meet up with this guy.
Yeah, fools. Where in Europe are you? Do you want to come and visit Sweden? I'm actually having somebody coming visit me next week who I got to know from the channel. It's going to be very, very interesting.
That's cool.
Yeah. So where was I? So let's say that there's a 70% chance of success of, that they managed to land on Mars, right? And then let's say that there's a 70% chance that once they landed on Mars, that they can like meet up with the rover. Yeah. And then there's a 70% chance that once they have the canister, then the rocket like flies up to the correct orbit. And then, when you add them like after each other, like you go from 100% chance, and then 70%, and then 70% of that, and then 70% of that, like you quite soon end up like the mission has like a 10% chance of succeeding,
Yeah, I don't know how that works. I'm sure it's not like launch, because launch, obviously their responsibility is different. Maybe it's like a milestone based thing. Is if you launch successfully, 10% pay. If you get to Mars orbit, another 20%. If you land on the surface, another 10%, or something like that. Or maybe, I'm really not sure how that gets structured.
Yeah.
Or maybe they just get paid the full money regardless if there is a failure.
Yeah, I'm very curious. I guess we will find out about this. By the way, any news on any interviews with Mr. Sir Peter Beck and Adam Spice?
Nothing as of yet.
I haven't talked to anyone about it.
Yeah, I haven't yet. I'm gonna actually write to to the contact person.
I was
after this
hoping
weekly.
to talk to a couple other space companies as well. I thought it'd be pretty cool, but I've had limited success in that arena.
Yeah, I wrote to Stoke Space, and they said they're too busy. But maybe later. That was their answer. At least.
Well, at least they answered you.
Yeah, at least they answered. Yeah.
Yeah, I got an answer from Redwire, but anyway. Yeah, I guess talk about that another time.
Exactly. It will happen. It's
we'll see.
Yeah,
I did email Morgan to see if I could chat with Frank, because I know he joined the leadership team, and I was curious to see if we could have him on and hear a little bit of. I don't necessarily want to talk about stock with him, but more so about his previous experience at Daimler and Rivian and elsewhere that he's worked, and understand a little bit about if he's seen anything. He doesn't need to give specifics, obviously, because it's proprietary, but I wanted to hear a little bit about if he sees some really quick wins that can help with the respective efficiency, whether that's like from a cost efficiency perspective, or if that's from just like hey, you can shave a day off here or 2 days off here by doing X, Y, and Z, or even just setting up the shop floor in a certain way. I'm just kind of curious to pick his brain and hear what he has to say.
That would be a very interesting interview. Actually. I'm also super curious, like what he sees, because like on Daimler, like they were making thousands of cars per week, right? And you don't need like thousands of neutrons per week. Like we would be like jumping up and down like Elon at a Trump rally for 1 neutron per week, So yeah, I'm very curious about his. That would be very cool. I hope you get that interview.
Yeah.
The hope would be to at least ask and see, and then figure out a way that we could expand it with all this. It'd be good to have us all involved.
Cool. All right. So the next news here, or the lack of it, is that this is the quarter where we're supposed to have record launches. Up to 7 is planned. And so far, no news about new launches. And we are halfway almost into October. So what is your guys' prediction about launches this quarter?
I've been thinking 16 for a while, for the full year. That is not 16 in Q4.
Yeah.
But
where are we now currently, year to date?
11.
Yeah, 11.
Okay.
And even that I think would be.
Oh my God.
BD Brett's getting jealous.
Brett's can't be shamed by fool's gold. So I would say, to me, like, I guess 15 would be okay. Less than that would certainly be disappointing. I really don't think 18. I know they said like there's an outside chance they could get to 18 in the last earnings call. I don't see that happening. What do you guys think?
I'm still struggling with 18 as well. I mean, no offense, but 5.25 is pretty tough. Sorry, I'm not even doing good math. 7.25 is pretty tough. I don't know. It's tough for me because we're already almost entering into the halfway point of October, and I don't even know when the next date for a launch is. And granted, I know that 1 or 2 of those will be haste, and so
I think 2 haste is what we've. Heard.
They might have already gone off, and they'll probably announce it. You know what I mean? Because some of those are a little bit more quiet. At least the first one was. Scouts Arrow was really quiet, and we found out like a day or 2 after it launched. So who knows if that's the case, because they are DoD and either like subsets of the DoD or DoD itself. Those types of launches. So I'm curious, but other than those, I mean, I haven't heard any specific dates other than tentative things for October, November, and December. Yeah. And those don't actually have dates associated with them. So
I feel like months. I feel like if there's 2 haste launches from Wallops, they really should be able to handle 3 from New Zealand.
Oh my God.
But
what's
again,
happening?
It comes down to the customers. Yeah. Jeez.
Jesus Christ. Yeah.
Fools 1 cent less.
Yes. So I was gonna say we have people on the ground, so I would be surprised if we don't find, like, if they can launch Haste without us knowing it,
No,
because
we would know. They
yeah.
close the airspace, but we don't know very far ahead of time usually with Haste.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit worried about this quarter because I don't know if they can, like, what I don't know is, let's say we get no launches in October, right? And how close can they have and how many launches? Because I understand that the production is no problem and probably the factory is full of, like, basically done electrons. But are they able to, like, launch, like, every week, to, like, catch up? So maybe in December they're going to do like four, like, that's where I'm a bit worried.
I think it's something it's a legitimate concern.
Yeah. So, and I don't know why they announced the launches like so in the last minute, like yeah, but it is what it is. Cool. So that was all the Rocket Lab news, other than that they announced actually that they're going to have the earnings on the 12th of November. Hopefully we can get interviews with Adam Spice and Peter Beck at that time. We're going to see. We're going to figure out soon. What if we get an interview with them, like, what do you guys want to most ask them?
Oh, I haven't even really started thinking about that. I guess a lot also depends on what we learn at the end of the quarter in the earnings call, because generally there's stuff in there you want to follow up on or ask about.
Yeah, I know the last time I was very interested in Haste, because we had been at that point when last time we talked to him about 12 months on from Scout's Arrow, and we hadn't really heard of any really large contracts come through for Haste. We've seen 4 contracts. I'm not necessarily sure how large they are and how many tests are going to be done with those particular contracts themselves, but I would say, personally, looking at Haste and only launching 1 rocket and getting 4 contracts from it is pretty impressive. So I'm kind of curious to see how, now that you have 4 or so other contracts that you need to fulfill, how it kind of expands from there, right? Are you going to continue to get 8, 10, 15 customers? I'm not exactly sure. What nations would you be willing to work with? Is it anybody that's a part of NATO? Is it, because we noted that within the last interview that it can be done from anywhere in the world, or at least select places in the world if the company chooses to do so. And so, depending on what, I would like to kind of dive deeper in that if they've had more conversations with folks, because I know they've talked about it from an Australia perspective, New Zealand perspective. Kind of curious if they've had negotiations going on with anybody else. I know that they've had, from our previous interview with Adam, they've been asked about setting up locations for Electron in other countries, but I think that's a lot more difficult, right? Because it's orbital and it's not as easy to kind of get permission to do than say suborbital. So I don't know. I'm still stuck on the Haste piece. I would also like to chime in a little bit more about understanding what's going on with Neutron, and really, have we gotten I know we're not fully done testing, right? There's obviously, the 3 or 4 minute test that we would need to do with the rocket engine, but I'm kind of curious, what percentage complete is that? Maybe they give us that information in the earnings call, maybe they don't. What else is there? Any more news on the constellation front? How big of a piece of business do we actually think it's going to be? Because I think there's some questions whether or not it's going to be, a large piece of business, or some people are starting to think it's actually going to be a smaller piece of business.
Good luck getting a clear answer on that one.
Yeah, they've been giving more and more data. It's to the point that soon I'm making a video on it, but I updated my valuation model to like think with a little bit the constellation business, and my guess is that it's going to be many smaller businesses, and they're going to test and throw spaghetti at the wall, and
Sure.
it might be that they hit something that becomes a multi-billion. But I think that they're going to have quite some different, a little bit smaller, like not $1 billion, but multi-$100 million per year.
Could be. There's lots of nice business opportunities out there. So
yeah.
So we were kind of debating this on the Discord, and I know you were talking about it. So Matt, at this point, like, do you assign any value to a potential Rocket Lab future constellation, or does that not come into your valuation equations at all?
Good question, man. I've always just kind of thought that with Neutron being a success, we'd see a pop to 20 and a pullback to 15. And then when we get profitability a couple months after that, a couple quarters after that, we would start to lean more towards $20 a share. And this is assuming no further dilution, right? So we're talking, we're talking, what is that in terms of market cap? A $10 billion market cap from where we are today. So I don't know what I would value. I haven't really thought about the medium term where like there's a constellation that's going up. I've just kind of thought about what the end goal is. And to me, I see the end goal being anywhere between 25 to 50 billion. But granted, that's kind of like my lower case, right? Obviously, I have like a what I really think case, and then there's the upside case. But right now, I haven't really given thought as to what I would put a valuation on the constellation, to answer your question bluntly.
Sure. I feel like, it's a plan at this point, but it's hard to say like the stock should be worth more today. I don't know. It's tough. I
agree with you. But the thing is, like, I 100% thought the way you did until ASTS went to the moon, and I'm like, if there is another company that has zero revenue today, that is purely, is valued on future constellation, and they're like, what is their valuation now? Like 8 billion?
Yeah, it's been falling a little bit. I think the stock price is around 22 now. It was around 30 at the highs. I can see where you're drawing parallels.
Yeah,
though, they do have satellites already in orbit and more.
Yeah, but so does Rocket Lab, right? So it's my point is, like, I'm not saying that Rocket Lab should get 8 billion for the constellations, but I'm also saying that, like, we have been assigning zero, and I'm like, I think the truth is like in between. And especially now that they have been giving a little bit of hints into, which direction they're going. So it's,
it's just hard to give them value for something they haven't like spent the money on yet, in terms of, like, they're gonna have to pay to build these satellites and stuff. So like that'll be a cost. Like, I feel like I'll feel more comfortable once they start doing that kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the opportunity, because I again 100% agree with you. And if you say that, because we know that Wall Street is going to totally discount it, right? So if you have a model where you're saying that, okay, if things go good, like in my model, I think it's very pessimistic assumptions. And you go like, okay, even if these pessimistic assumptions come true and you discount that back to present time, and then you see that the stock should be worth $15, then and currently we're at 10 or 8 or some like, I don't know where we're going to trade in the near future, but that disconnect, I think, is quite an opportunity for the believers to buy.
Sure.
Yeah. Cool. So next news and last news, Dave, I think maybe you need to go in a minute.
What's that? Oh yeah. Yeah, you're right. I should probably go, actually. Sorry.
Yeah.
But
you actually, perfect timing. We finished all the Rocket Lab news. So now we're just gonna talk shit probably.
I will be watching Starship launch tomorrow. Sounds like it's a go. Should be extremely exciting. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll talk to you guys next time.
All right.
Oh,
Gotcha. Oh my God.
another
Dave,
bit from BD Fool's Gold, man.
Jeez.
Jesus Christ. Dave, you need to start co-streaming.
Yeah, Dave, you messed up, my guy.
When I do, I find it's like the viewership's pretty low. I assume it's because a lot of people are already on this channel or something. I don't know. And it's hard to interact. Anyway.
It is. There could be a better way to interact, because like if you try to respond to somebody in Vince's chat, you can't. But like, yeah, so it's like you almost have to have all 3 streams up at once. It's kind of
maybe
a pain,
it's worth doing. But yeah, I do gotta go. So I will see you guys next time. You're
the man. Fool's Gold, thank you so much. Mopbox, thank you for becoming a member. To the money gang. Much appreciated. You both rock. Much appreciated.
Yes, thank you to all the members, and of course, thank you super much to Fool's Gold.
Fool's Gold's a wild man.
Yeah. So, yeah, Dave brought this up, but the Starship seems to be a go for launch, and there is a very interesting Sunday coming up. So we have a Falcon Heavy launch with the Europa Clipper mission that is basically sending a satellite to study the Europa moon of Jupiter and possibly find life there. A very exciting mission. There is the Starship launch that was okayed, and it looks like they're going to try to catch the rocket with the Mechazilla arms. And we have a Blue Origin launch, so a pretty busy Sunday. Matt, any thoughts about streaming the Starship launch?
What time is it? I'm gonna be what's the word I'm looking for? I'm gonna be busy at like noon my time, so I don't know when the launch is gonna be.
Yeah, I also don't know when it is. If it's in the evening, I can also.
If it's midday, I'll probably be occupado. But if it's like this time, like 3 to 4 p.m. my time, or whatever the last few hours have been your time, I could potentially do it.
Okay, we stay in touch.
Yeah,
we see when it is.
And I'm sorry I missed your question initially. I was looking at islands.
Oh, this
is a good one.
Yeah, funny topic. Cool. So I actually didn't get to say what I want to ask in the interview when we meet them. Is Adam Spice has referenced now many times when they ask him, where do you see the growth of Rocket Lab coming from? And even on the Bloomberg interview, he said like the government, like that everybody's waiting that the hockey stick is going to come from the private sector. And he mentioned again that like our hockey stick is coming from the government, and I want to ask him, like, is it like a specific thing, like a contract that you're waiting for, or are you anticipating like many new contracts? And when should we anticipate announcements, or because maybe he can say, like in Q2 we are expecting some contracts, then at least we know what to track. I definitely want to ask about this Mars sample return mission, like if they think that there's a chance for a contract, how big do they think that contract is? So
yeah, I don't know. Somebody said, you got to bring the shades back. I literally took them off to the chat. I just came home, so I was cleaning the car and everything like that, making sure to fresh for tomorrow. Contracts. That's a tough one, man. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if you start seeing contracts come through even before Neutron. This is speculative, by the way. I wouldn't be surprised if you see some folks signing up for contracts prior to a successful Neutron. Reason being is because I think you've already seen enough folks like Stoke and many others start to sell contracts already. Granted, they're at discounts, but I anticipate that you'll end up seeing something where competition just gets more and more fierce, and the amount of people that are actually going to end up going into medium launch sort of vehicle territory will continue to shrink. So that being said, I wouldn't be surprised if you have some folks pre-sign up for some Neutron opportunities, especially as you get it like wet dressed, right? So you have the rocket testing that's already ongoing. You have some of the tank testing that they've already done. So once you get a mock-up and a wet dress rehearsal associated with it, I would not be surprised if you actually start to see some contracts come through. And then also, I guess it depends on when some of these other things come through, like the Mars contract. Obviously, you're going to have a neutron rocket for that, or at least some sort of vehicle be launched from a SpaceX. So I'm not exactly sure what exactly that $700,000 Mars contract entails. Does that mean launch? Does that mean a sort of like capture device to be able to land, and then, which I guess it will still have launch capability because you have to launch it off of Mars, if that makes sense. I don't know. Lots to potentially be considering.
Yeah, so I mean, hopefully we can ask them about this to give us more details on what to think. And then the last question that I really want to ask is, in an interview, Sir Peter Beck said that somebody asked, like, okay, what's going to happen to all the engineers when Neutron is finished? Like, are they going to get fired, you know? And then Peter Beck was it was kind of a stupid question. I don't know who asked this. And then Peter Beck was like, no, they're going on immediately on the next big thing for the company, you know? And I want to ask him, like, okay, but what is that thing? And so what are the engineers going to work on straight after Neutron?
I think there's a lot to still work on. There's the potential international space stations of the future. There's the gateway that's going to be circulating the moon. And for those of the people who aren't familiar, obviously there's the piece of continuing to study the moon and learning more from the lunar moon that we have on Earth, and putting some sort of international space station that actually orbits the moon, and you can go back and forth. So instead of having people spend, let's say, 2 to 3 days on the moon and having to come back and launch back to say Earth, you can have people kind of circling an international space station, rejuvenate themselves, you know, kind of go back and forth from that international space station that surrounds and orbits, not surrounds, but orbits the moon. And so that way you could do trips of more like a couple months at a time. And so there's a lot of talks associated with that. I also think that there's going to be a lot to be done with ESA, which is the European space. Sorry, is it ETA? It might be ETA. There's a company that wants to do the cryogenic fuel storage to potentially fuel Mars missions mid-flight, or even deeper space missions mid-flight. And so I think that's something that Rocket Lab is going to continue to do. I just think that there's a lot of continued R&D that's going to need to be done in the coming months and years that hasn't necessarily been fully fleshed out. So when I was thinking it was the LOXSAT, right? Yeah, Fuel Depot in orbit, the LOXSAT, liquid oxygen satellite. So this is with, who is LOXSAT with? I thought it was ETA. Anyway, but there's a lot of different things that are potentially needing to be done, and I think a lot of it has to do with eventually continuing to build out the satellite kind of ready-made systems to continue that end-to-end piece. And you know, eventually, what I'd like to see is more typical companies really come into play. So like the Verizons, the AT&Ts, those guys, I'd like to see them, you know, in terms of being able to launch things up into space. I'd like to see them get involved as well, as kind of satellite communications become more and more normalized. So I don't know. There's a lot. And working on Blue Ghost as well. I'm not exactly sure. I know the Blue Ghost is the Firefly lunar lander, and I know that Rocket Lab's part of that specifically is going to be the flight software. And so I'm curious to see if there's any details or really some just fundamental videos that we can see that shows that software in kind of work. So yeah, curious to see what that helps with and where those potential avenues go. And based off what I'm seeing, it could very well be that there's an avenue for human launch as well. I'm still not really holding my breath just based off of what we heard from Pete in the past. But if Boeing really is going to pull out and not really continue to fund Starliner kind of going forward, and that leaves an avenue, would that second individual to help provide those sorts of systems to the International Space Station be open? And I guess it all just depends on who's going to provide the capital and what's going to happen with that. So I don't know. We don't even know. So keep in mind, I think what I know that is publicly available is like Artemis 4, Artemis 5. And we've never even seen what, Artemis mission 20 looks like. Right. And to know, and maybe that's part of what this Mars mission is, but you have to think like where Apollo was however many missions. Right. So if you think about it, we're talking about something where we know maybe a quarter of the missions to date, and span over the next 5 to 10 years. We're talking about things that aren't going to happen until 2027, 2028 in those missions. And so when you think about going into the next decade, what's going to be the problems of the next decade that Rocket Lab has to start worrying about today to be able to get there by 2030, 2032? And to that, I just don't have that privy to that information, but we'll end up seeing, I guess, in the long term. But I know if anybody's going to be able to handle it and do well, it's going to be our guys at Rocket Lab, because they have such good ability to execute.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. I mean, I think that this was quite a fun stream. We went through pretty much everything. I don't know if you have anything else to add that we didn't mention this week.
No, I mean, other than, people might be scared about potentially buying here and ETA space for Lockside. Exactly. People are afraid about buying here. And I think, you really need to look about what you really think the company is going to be able to do, and how they're competing against everybody else in the space. And to me, if you were to talk about what Rocket Lab brings to the table, it sits there along the lines of what Blue Origin, what ULA, what SpaceX is doing. And granted, they're mentioned in the same breath, but if you think about it in terms of cadence, Rocket Lab is number 2. And so if you think about where Rocket Lab is today versus where SpaceX might have been, 5-10 years ago, I don't want to say that it's going to be verbatim. Like, I'm not saying in 5 to 10 years, Rocket Lab is going to be a $210 billion company like SpaceX is today. But it wasn't too long ago that SpaceX was at these valuations of $5 to $10 billion. And look where they are at today. So not saying it's going to be verbatim. I'm not saying it's a direct analog. They're obviously going after different things. And they're obviously focusing on particular parts of the addressable market. So keep that in with a grain of salt as well. But to me, I would just be cautious. If you're looking for a day trade or something of the like, then this probably isn't the company for you, because it's going to be very volatile, full of a lot of, which some people, if they time it well, can do really well on. But to me, if you're thinking about something that could be a generational opportunity that you're willing to risk 1% to 2% of your portfolio in, then I think that this is something that can grow into a very substantial position. And I would say, even if you don't want to invest in it today because it's not profitable, or, keep your tabs on it, keep the ticker symbol in your watch list, and just be cautious, because even once we get to, say, profitability, it's not going to be too late. It's not going to be a place where you say, all right, it's done, because you think about it, by the end of this decade, we're going to be in several $1 billion in revenue a year, and we're probably going to be entering a place where we're at $10 billion in market cap, maybe $8 billion in market cap. But who's to say that that's the limit, right? It could go to $20 billion in market cap, could go to 50. I'm thinking it's going to be between 25 and 30. And as my low case, that's kind of where I'm saying it'll stop off. I honestly think it could probably go into the 9-figure range, which is $100 billion plus. Actually, that might be low. 9 figures might be only 100 million. Yeah,
it is.
It
so
is.
I mean the 10 figure.
The 11-figure range. 10 figures is. I'm not good with math, guys. Give me a break. So I should stop using fancy language. 10 billion. 10 billion is, I don't know how many figures, but 100 billion, right? So I think it has the potential to go to 100 billion. It's going to take a while. It's not going to happen tomorrow. So don't expect, if you're going to buy it at $10 here, that it's going to be, blowing up to, let's just say 20x from here tomorrow. But, it could be something. And then also, once they get enough money, who's to say they're not going to buy back shares, right? There's always that possibility as well, and a potential future dividend. But I'm talking years down the road,
decades possibly. Yeah,
potentially decades, right? If they meet, the problem is a lot of people expect dividends, buybacks, stuff like that, but you're talking about pennies. Like, especially if these guys are able to generate gap income of say 30%. I would encourage them to continue to invest, So invest back into the business, not necessarily give some sort of dividends or something like that. It just doesn't make sense for a company that has this much potential going forward.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for watching. Super thanks to Fool's Gold and all the channel members and Brett. Thank you guys. You're amazing. And see you guys next week on Rocket Lab Weekly. Have a good week. Ciao, ciao.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. Have a good afternoon.